A poor driver helped his billionaire boss win a $500 million contract, but no one in the entire company ever imagined what he did for him, or how far a poor driver would go to protect the very boss who barely remembered his name. At 5 a.m., in the dim glow of the mansion's driveway, Ethan Cole, a humble, worn-shoe poor driver, adjusted his faded uniform, rehearsing gratitude he never received, while watching his powerful boss, Alexander Grant, a polished billionaire CEO chasing a life-changing $500 million contract, rush past him without a glance. Ethan may have been poor, but his loyalty was priceless. He drove Alexander through life's storms, heard his quiet fears, saw his hidden pain. And today, when the most important deal of Alexander's life demanded perfection, courage, and trust, only a poor driver stood between victory and disaster. But behind Ethan's quiet eyes, a secret burned, one tied to the $500 million contract, a secret that could either break Alexander or save him forever. Why would a poor driver sacrifice everything for a billionaire? What did Ethan know that no one else knew? And when the truth behind this $500 million miracle finally comes to light, will the world praise him, or will it destroy him? But most importantly, why did a poor driver become the only person who could decide the fate of a billionaire? Under the rising blush of dawn, Ethan Cole guided the glossy black Mercedes through the winding private road toward Grant Industries headquarters. His hands stayed firm on the wheel, though they trembled faintly beneath the surface like the heartbeat of someone carrying a truth too heavy for his pocket. To everyone else, he was a poor driver, quiet, invisible, scraping every paycheck to keep his sick sister alive and his rented room lit each month. But today he felt something shifting, as though fate had finally opened one eye and looked his way. Alexander Grant sat beside him in the back seat, sculpted by a world of wealth, sharp custom suit, wrist heavy with a watch worth more than Ethan's life savings, eyes cloudy from sleepless nights. The billionaire was brilliant, feared, admired, the type whose footsteps echoed when he wasn't walking. But right now even he looked human, jaw tight, tapping a pen as his phone buzzed with messages from board members demanding miracles. "This contract is the future of our company," Alexander murmured, voice low but heavy with stress. $500 million? One mistake and the tide turns against us. Ethan nodded in the mirror, respectful, invisible. "Everything will go well, sir." Alexander barely looked up. "Just drive." There it was again, the distance of class, of power, of someone who ruled skyscrapers and someone who polished them. Yet Ethan didn't flinch. He had lived in the cracks of life long enough to stop expecting warmth from men who never learned hunger. But his loyalty didn't come from obligation. No. Ethan had heard Alexander's late-night phone calls. The billionaire kept a hidden fear beneath that polished skin, fear of failing his late father, fear of losing the empire built on a dying promise. Ethan knew things no one else knew, and he had sworn quietly without applause to protect the man who unknowingly once saved him. Memory, sharp as glass, cut through him. 13 years old, soaked in rain, begging outside a construction site, a man stopped, handed him food, cash for medicine for his sick sister, and disappeared without asking a name. Later, Ethan would learn it had been a young Alexander Grant, long before power hardened him. That moment had rewritten Ethan's life, and Alexander never knew. Today, Ethan intended to repay fate. Traffic snarled ahead near the city center. Strange for this early. Police cars blocked an intersection. Ethan squinted. Protesters, cameras, banners calling out billionaires. Not good. Alexander's company was already under scrutiny for layoffs. One viral moment could sink public trust. Sink the contract. Sink everything. Ethan's instincts prickled. "Sir," he said softly, "we should take the waterfront route." Alexander glanced up, face carved from impatience. "That's 10 minutes slower." "It's safer," Ethan answered, voice steady. "There's a protest ahead, media." Alexander stiffened. Bad optics could kill a dream faster than a bullet. "But trust?" Billionaires didn't trust poor drivers. "We don't have time," he snapped. "Stay the course." Ethan hesitated. He knew disaster when he smelled it. Knew how seconds decide futures. The protest grew louder, smoke rising. A chant carried through the air like a storm warning. The Mercedes rolled forward. Then it happened. Someone recognized the car. "That's Grant, a corporate murderer." "Parasite!" A crowd swarmed, fist pounding metal. Cameras flashed like lightning. A water bottle exploded against the windshield. Alexander's chest heaved, shock cracking his armor. "Get us out of here!" And this was the moment fate had rehearsed. Without waiting, Ethan spun the wheel sharply, tires screeched, engine roared. The car burst backward, dodging hands in rage. Security sirens wailed from afar. Ethan's pulse hammered, but he moved like water, flowing through chaos, finding life in impossibility. He cut through an alley, gliding the car like fabric in wind, emerging onto a side road clear of madness. Silence slammed back into the cabin like a door. Alexander sat frozen, disbelief softening his jaw. How did you know?" Ethan breathed slow. "Sometimes, sir. Being poor teaches you to read danger faster than rich men can buy warnings." For the first time, Alexander met Ethan's eyes fully. Respect flickered, a fragile ember but real. Ethan looked away quickly. Loyalty didn't seek gratitude. It simply lived. A buzz from Alexander's phone. A board member texting, "Media reported a riot attempt. If you had been caught on camera, deal would have been dead." Alexander swallowed. The reality hit him like a steel beam. "Ethan," he whispered, voice unsteady. "You may have just saved $500 million. Ethan only nodded, hiding the truth he carried deeper still. Saving Alexander wasn't about money. It never had been. But as they resumed the drive, Ethan didn't see the black SUV trailing behind them. Didn't see the eyes watching. Someone else wanted that $500 million contract, and they had just realized the billionaire had a secret weapon. A poor driver willing to go farther than anyone expected. And that made Ethan dangerous. Under the polished glow of the marble lobby, the world bowed for Alexander Grant. Suits straightened. Secretaries lowered their heads. Cameras floated in polished hands like obedient birds ready to capture power. But as Ethan parked the car and stepped out, he felt the weight of eyes. Not admiration, not respect, but the quiet dismissal reserved for the poor. He buttoned his worn blazer anyway. Today wasn't about pride. It was about purpose. Alexander moved toward the revolving doors, phone to his ear, voice sharp with urgency, and Ethan followed a few steps behind, unseen in plain sight. The tension in the air crackled like static on a broken radio. Investors padded across the lobby with silver watches and steel ambition. A contract worth $500 million didn't just change fortunes. It shifted the gravity of power. Alexander's rivals wanted blood, and blood always trickled down to the weakest floor first. Ethan scanned the room instinctively. Habit from growing up in streets where danger had a face, footsteps, shadows. A man in a gray suit lingered too long near the front desk. Another whispered into his sleeve. The black SUV from earlier flashed in his mind like the afterglow of lightning. Trouble followed money. Trouble hunted desperation. Alexander finally ended the call and turned slightly. "Stay nearby. I might need to leave quickly." Ethan nodded. "No, thank you." No acknowledgement of the life he'd saved minutes ago. That was fine. Loyalty didn't need applause. Only purpose. Alexander stepped into the elevator with executives. The doors slid shut, sealing a world Ethan wasn't born into. Up there, the contracts were signed, the futures were planned, and people like him were forgotten. But forgotten didn't mean powerless. Ethan leaned against a pillar, eyes sweeping the space again. Then a voice cracked the air like dropped glass. "Hey, driver boy." Ethan turned. Blake Maddox, Alexander's senior vice president, sharp hairline, sharper tongue, strode toward him with a smirk that could cut glass. Blake hated that Alexander trusted a driver more than him this morning. The air soured with resentment. "You think saving the car makes you some kind of hero?" Blake sneered. "You're still just a driver, a seat warmer with a steering wheel." Ethan looked at him calmly. "I never said I was anything more." Blake leaned in, voice low and venomous. "Men like you don't belong near power. Don't start thinking you do." Ethan didn't react. Years of swallowing pride made him immune to men like Blake. But just before Blake turned away, Ethan saw something meaner flicker in his eyes. Fear. Blake was worried. Worried Ethan mattered. Worried loyalty could outrun title, and fear made dangerous men reckless. Minutes later, Ethan walked toward the staff cafe to get water. As he passed the conference floor, voices spilled through the cracked door, raised, sharp, tense. Alexander's voice cut through first. "What do you mean the rival company already submitted our proposal format? How did they get it?" A woman answered, trembling. "Sir, we don't know. Someone leaked it. A chair scraped violently. Blake's voice followed, shrill and falsely shocked. This contract was confidential. If someone close slipped, silence. A heavy one. Ethan's throat tightened. Blake wouldn't— Yes? Alexander demanded. Blake exhaled loudly like performing shock. Well, the only new person in close proximity lately is the driver. The accusation punched Ethan's ribs harder than Blake ever could. No evidence, no basis, just class warfare disguised as suspicion. Ethan froze in the hallway, jaw locked. A board member sighed. Drivers overhear everything. Whispers hissed. Paranoia breeds quickly in rooms where millions dance on strings. Ethan pressed a palm to the wall to steady himself. He could walk in now, defend himself, but that would make him look guilty and emotional. Poor men weren't allowed the luxury of emotion. A familiar voice rose inside the room. Alex's lawyer, Ms. Harlow. Controlled, intelligent. We can't accuse an employee without proof. That would destroy morale and reputation, especially someone so loyal. Relief washed through Ethan. But then Alexander spoke, voice quieter, strained. Just keep an eye on things. We can't afford betrayal right now. Betrayal. The word stung. Ethan had bled loyalty long before he ever drove a luxury car. But this was the problem with wealth. The higher people rose, the more ghosts they imagined haunting their shadows. He stepped away from the door slowly, forcing breath into tight lungs. He couldn't crumble. His sister. His promise. His debt to a kindness never repaid. He walked back to the lobby, steady but burning inside. That was when he noticed it. Gray suit from earlier moving purposefully toward the stairwell. A glint of metal under his jacket caught Ethan's eye. Barely a flash, but enough to freeze the world for a fraction of a second. Gun? Knife, something meant for harm nobody else saw. World too busy admiring their own reflection. But Ethan saw. And instinct roared awake. Survival wasn't a luxury for the poor. It was muscle, reflex, memory. The elevator dinged. Alexander and his executives stepped out, shoulders broad with corporate war. Gray suit shifted his hand toward his jacket. Time compressed. Ethan moved. Fast. Silent. Swift like a shadow born from street instinct and unspoken loyalty. He intercepted Gray suit at the corner pillar, grip iron on the man's wrist just before metal slid free. The man stiffened, shocked. Their eyes locked. Predator to protector. Not today, Ethan whispered. Alexander turned, startled by the sudden motion. Board members gasped. Blake's jaw fell open. No one understood yet, but they would. Ethan tightened his hold just enough to make the truth clear. Not enough to break bone, not yet. You picked the wrong building, he murmured to the stranger. Security rushed. Chaos swelled. Alexander stared at Ethan, not as a driver now, but something else. Something dangerous. Something loyal. Something he didn't yet know how to name. And in that breath, before security swarmed, before the truth broke open like daylight through stone, Ethan realized saving Alexander once was chance. Saving him twice, that made him a threat to someone. Someone who didn't want the $500 million contract signed. Someone watching, planning, closing in. And the war had only begun. The conference floor erupted like a shaken beehive. Security pinned the stranger to the ground. Metal clattered, a compact tactical knife sharp enough to slice silence. Executives stumbled back in shock, clutching silk ties and expensive breaths. Phones shook in trembling hands. Whispers buzzed like flies around danger. Alexander Grant, billionaire titan, boardroom conqueror, feared negotiator, stood utterly still, staring at Ethan as if seeing him for the first time. The man who wielded billions suddenly looked small, humbled by the reality that his life had been moments from ending in front of the company that worshipped him. Who are you? Alexander breathed, half whisper, half disbelief. It wasn't said with suspicion. It was said like a man asking fate for answers. Ethan straightened, pulse steady now that the storm was caught in his hands instead of the world's. A shadow of the street still flickered behind his calm eyes, the reflexes of someone who had been hunted by life long before suits and limousines. He didn't answer. Humility survived better when it spoke less. Blake, who had accused Ethan moments earlier, now stared pale-faced, fear curdling with jealousy in his throat. He stepped forward, weak smile trembling. Good instincts, Ethan, very proactive. The words felt like swallowing broken pride. Ethan didn't acknowledge him, not out of arrogance but clarity. Some men didn't deserve his breath. The detained man spat anger through clenched teeth. "You ruined everything." A guard silenced him, but his eyes screamed murder. Ethan didn't flinch. He'd seen that look long before corporate carpets cushioned his steps. In alleys, outside night bars, the kind of hatred desperate men wore when failure meant punishment, far worse than arrest. Someone else had sent him. Alexander exhaled, long and shuddered. "Bring him to private security," he ordered, voice hardening back into steel. "Find out who sent him." Executives scattered, shaken. Board members whispered in tight knots, eyes flicking between Ethan and Alexander with new calculations. In rooms fueled by power and fear, loyalty was suddenly a currency worth studying. Ms. Harlow approached Ethan. "Are you hurt?" "No," he answered softly, but something inside him was bruised by silence, by suspicion, by the truth that loyalty rarely earned trust from those who never learned to need others. Alexander stepped closer. His voice dropped into a tone unfamiliar even to himself, humble, shaken, sincere. "You saved me. Twice, He swallowed the words like they were foreign. "Thank you, Ethan." The world didn't freeze, didn't cheer, didn't suddenly turn warm, but something shifted. Respect, real as steel, flickered. "You don't need to thank me, sir," Ethan said. "It's my job." "No," Alexander shook his head slowly. "It's more than a job. No one else would have moved like you did. No one else would have seen that." Ethan didn't answer. Praise felt heavier than insults. It made him nervous. Seen. Vulnerable. Seen men get targeted. Alexander's eyes narrowed slightly, studying him. Something resembling curiosity, no realization, lit behind his gaze. But before he could speak again, his assistant rushed over, face pale. "Sir, the investors are waiting upstairs. They heard about everything, the contract, the 500 million lifeline." It still dangled by a thin thread, shaking from danger's breath. Alexander straightened, shoulders rising like skyscrapers built on sheer will. "Prepare the top conference room," he commanded, then turned to Ethan. "Come with me." A ripple shot through the room. Drivers didn't enter strategy floors. Employees whispered like wind-scraping glass. Blake's face twisted, fear of being replaced mixing with disbelief. Ethan blinked. "Sir?" Alexander's voice left no gaps. "I trust you more than half the people in this building." It was surreal. A billionaire declaring trust in a poor driver in front of those who worshipped money, not character. But before Ethan could respond, a vibration buzzed in his pocket. His phone. One message. One name on the screen. "Maya, sister hospital called. Please come." "It's urgent." His chest froze. Breath halted. The sterile memory of hospital rooms rushed back. Monitors, beeping machines. Nurses whispering bad news too quietly for Hope to hear. Not now. Not today. Not when Alexander needed him. Destiny tugged both arms, demanding loyalty from two worlds that never met. Alexander saw the sudden shift in Ethan's expression. "Everything all right?" Ethan forced calm into cracked places. "My sister. She's in the hospital." He swallowed. "She needs me." Silence dropped between them. Not hostile, not cold. Heavy. Real. Alexander stared, torn, caught between need and humanity. "I understand," he finally said. "Family first, go." The words were gentle, yet guilt gnawed Ethan's bones. But he nodded, a quiet bow of duty to both worlds, and turned to leave. He didn't make it 2 steps. Boom. The building shook, distant, muffled, like an explosion swallowed by space and concrete. Sirens blared, lights flickered. Alarms screamed from the lower floors. Emergency systems activated. Executives panicked. Blake shouted orders nobody heard. Security rushed in chaos. Someone yelled, "Power fault in the data wing! Possible sabotage!" Alexander's eyes widened. Rival companies had gone from espionage to violence, hunting the $500 million throne. Suddenly, the billionaire wasn't a titan. He was a man surrounded by enemies, poisoned by betrayal, attacked from shadows, and he looked at Ethan, not for orders, but for faith. Ethan felt the pull again, responsibility like fire in his veins. Sister or duty, life or loyalty. Fate wouldn't choose. Fate demanded sacrifices. He closed his eyes for half a heartbeat, saw his sister's fragile smile, saw a young Alexander handing food to a starving boy in the rain, saw the world balancing on his choices again. He opened them. "I'll help you first," Ethan whispered. Not because Alexander was a billionaire, because he was a promise. A debt of kindness paid forward by destiny. Ethan turned toward the smoke-filled hallway, eyes sharp, steps steady. The poor driver had become the first wall between chaos and power again. He didn't know yet. Danger was no longer circling them. It was already inside the building. And someone was counting on Ethan to choose wrong. The hallway swallowed Ethan into a choking haze of smoke and panic. Fire sprinklers whined overhead, releasing desperate streams of water that misted the air. Mixing with the burnt scent of wiring and fear, executives fled toward emergency exits, gripping briefcases like life vests. Security scrambled through radio static, shouting incomplete orders into chaos. Ethan moved against the tide, toward danger, not away from it. It was instinct now. He had lived too long in a life where running never saved you. Only facing the fire ever did. Alexander followed close behind him, jacket off, sleeves rolled, jaw hard. A billionaire who had been untouchable hours ago now walked into smoke beside a poor driver, trusting his footsteps more than boardroom walls. It was strange how crises peeled life back to bone. Titles meant nothing when survival spoke. "Data wing is that way," Alexander said, pointing down a corridor clouded with smoke. "If they hit our servers, they could erase project files. Years of work. The investors, winning the contract won't matter if we don't walk out alive," Ethan cut in, voice firm but calm. Alexander blinked, surprised, not at the warning, but at the tone. Ethan wasn't speaking like a driver. He was speaking like someone who had faced life with nothing but will to shield him. They reached the data wing. Emergency doors locked shut, alarms howling. Through the reinforced glass, flames licked down a cable track like angry serpents. A blast had torn open a server casing. Heat shimmered. And there, kneeling beside the backup vault, was a man in black tactical gear. Wired gloves, earpiece, tool pack. Sabotage in motion. He didn't look like the hired thug earlier. This was precision. Military grade. Corporate warfare dressed like silence. Alexander froze. Ethan didn't. He grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall and smashed it against the access panel. Sparks spat as the emergency door jammed open enough for him to slip through. Smoke clawed his lungs. The saboteur turned sharply, startled, eyes widening behind a black mask. "Step away from that vault," Ethan commanded. The saboteur laughed, a cold sound that didn't belong in any humane world. "A driver? They sent a chauffeur to stop me? Call your CEO, dogs." "Oh, wait." His eyes narrowed at Ethan's stance. Trained, balanced, steady. "You don't move like staff." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I move like someone you don't want to underestimate." The saboteur lunged, blade flashing. Ethan met him with speed born from alley fights and street survival. Not polished combat. Raw instinct sharpened by hunger and danger. He blocked the blade with the metal extinguisher, striking back hard, forcing space. The saboteur stumbled, surprised by the force behind Ethan's wiry frame. Not a driver. A survivor. The vault's alarm beeped faster, countdown near completion. If the man finished his breach, decades of Alexander's empire would vanish in digital ash. Alexander pounded on the doorframe, voice cracking amidst alarms. "Ethan!" Ethan didn't look away. Didn't dare. One wrong glance and the blade would find bone. The saboteur swung again. Ethan ducked, grabbed his wrist, twisted. Pain shot across the man's face. The blade clanged to the floor. Ethan shoved him hard into a server rack, wires sparking at impact. The saboteur fell, dazed. Ethan lunged for the vault keypad, slamming his hand down, canceling the breach with seconds left. The alarm tone steadied, then slowed to silence. The digital screen glowed green. Safe. Ethan exhaled, a long burning breath. Sweat and smoke drenched his shirt. His lungs ached. His heartbeat thudded like drums in a war camp. But relief came, hard and beautiful. He'd saved it. Then pain, sharp and deep. A fist hit his ribs, hard enough to shock breath from bone. The saboteur, half conscious but desperate, clawed up, grabbing Ethan's collar, teeth bared like a cornered animal. "You don't know what you've interfered with," he snarled. "This company will fall." "No." Ethan shoved him back again, stronger this time. Not today. Security finally burst into the corridor, dragging the saboteur out. The fire suppression system kicked in fully, foam flooding the server room. Ethan staggered forward, breathing ragged. Alexander rushed in, gripping Ethan's shoulders. His voice shook, not from smoke, but something deeper. You could have died. Ethan wiped soot from his cheek, voice steady but soft. So could you. Alexander stared at him, eyes clouded, not with doubt but revelation. You've risked your life twice for me, why? You barely know me. Ethan met his gaze. You helped me once. You didn't know it. I owe you, and fairness doesn't exist in this world unless someone makes it exist. Alexander's expression broke, something inside him softening in a way no business victory ever had. What did I do? You fed a starving kid once, Ethan whispered. You gave him enough hope to keep going. That kid grew up. His voice tightened. He drives you now. Alexander's eyes widened. Understanding crashed over him like waves of memory. Rain. A young boy. A small act he'd forgotten, but life hadn't. For a moment they just breathed, two men from different worlds bound by a thread called grace. Then Alexander spoke, voice low, reverent. You don't owe me anything anymore. Ethan shook his head gently. I didn't stay because I owe you. I stayed because I believe in the man who gave a stranger hope. A beat passed. The fire alarm silenced. The panic eased. Order returned slowly. Alexander's phone buzzed. A message from investors. Heard about the incident. Your security and quick action impressed us. Congratulations, contract approved. 500 million secured not by wealth, but by loyalty. Alexander looked at Ethan. You're not my driver anymore. Ethan blinked. Sir, if you'll accept, you'll be my personal advisor, and I will sponsor your sister's medical care. She won't want for anything again. Emotion hit Ethan's chest with the force of years finally exhaling. He bowed his head, voice barely a whisper. Thank you. Alexander extended a hand, not to command, but to honor. Ethan shook it. The poor driver who once begged in rain had become the protector of a billionaire. Not by fortune, but by heart. And destiny, watching from the ruins of danger, smiled. Because sometimes life isn't about who has more wealth, but who has more courage, loyalty, and soul when the world burns.